To begin with, I just wanted to actually acknowledge something. Mazoon, your story resonates with me. 40 years ago, I left with a suitcase and some school books. I thought I was going back, and I didn't go to ever live back in my own country. Mark, I live in America now. I am able to travel the world because I have a British passport. It confers much privilege to me, and I value it extraordinarily. And Douglas, I think you and I appeared in England at about the same time. I appeared as an asylum seeker. You appeared as a baby in 1979. So we have that in common. But more than that, I think as I listened to the conversations, what struck me is that so much of what you guys are now saying has been part of the discussions out there in the world of people and in the world that I occupy in the last 22 years of people who are peace builders and humanitarian workers and relief workers. When we talk about the question of justice and mercy, justice for the host communities, this is not a new problem. If you were from Burundi in 1994, if you are from Pakistan or Iran when the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan happened, the host communities have always had a challenge of what do they do with populations coming in, especially when you're poor, when the host community itself is poor as well. So I think that we have to reimagine it, as Douglas mentioned, as Mark mentioned, and think about it this way. We spend so much money on security. We want to spend $10 billion on a wall. We put it into the security forces and the thugs and so forth to keep people out. Imagine if we actually gave incentives to host communities to host refugees, so that the schools and the clinics and the education that Mazoon is talking about actually came and was a benefit to not only the refugees, but also to the host communities. So thinking about it in these ways, and trust me, the amount of money we would have to spend on building houses and clinics and schools and roads is far less than what we're doing in terms of putting the money into walls and cages and security forces. So that could be one way of thinking about the justice and mercy balance. The second thing is we talk about, and Douglas raised this question of solving the problems over there. I'm in the world of peace building, and one of the things that we know is that for every $1,860 spent on defense and security, there is $1 that's spent on peace. We know that if you include women in peace processes, and today the talks are happening with the Taliban, that peace becomes much more sustainable, and yet we're not doing it. So the solutions are out there. We need the political will and the public to actually know that there is hope and there are possibilities of changing the way that we think about these. But for sure, people don't want to leave their countries. For sure, people want to return home. So if we could actually enable the peace building to happen before the conflict breaks out, the chances of a solution for all of us would be better. It is 60 times more cost-effective, 60 times more cost-effective to deal with the problem early on than to deal with the violence afterwards. Right? So again, it is possible, we just need to change the way we think about things. And then finally, you raised the question of who is a signatory to the Refugee Convention and so forth. I think this is a really important issue. The Refugee Convention we have goes back to the 20th century. It's from the end of World War I, World War II especially in the 1950s. Some countries existed, some countries didn't. Some countries signed. Turkey, for example, recognized refugees as Europeans because those were the refugees who came at the time. But they've come up with different ways of dealing with it. Some people give work permits and temporary residency. It's time for us to reimagine some of that because, again, when you seek asylum, you really can't go back to your own country. And a lot of people don't want to seek asylum. When you seek asylum, you can't work. It's absurd that you might be an engineer or a doctor and you end up somewhere and you can't actually practice your profession. So I think that there's scope there for us to also be thinking about addressing the three different points of view that we heard. And I just want to end on one thing. Education, education, education. Every child needs education. If I had missed a day or a month of school, I'm not sure whether I'd been able to go to university. So I think that we have to understand that this is urgent and it's critical. And despite all the debates, schooling must be integral to what we mean as humanitarian relief. Thank you.